Hello and a very good evening to today's daily news. Hello and a very good evening to today's daily news series. Let us first look at the main headlines of today. So the first topic which we are going to deal with is with regard to digital constitutionalism. In the past week, with regard to the Sanchar Sathi app and the various notifications which were brought about by Department of Telecommunication had brought in a lot of controversies, and then the government took back both the notification, one of the significant notifications amongst that. Now in this entire spectrum, the one broader concept that has emerged in this particular situation is that of digital constitutionalism. So we will be exploring what exactly digital constitutionalism is, because remember, constitutionalism as a topic has already appeared once in the prelims, and a multiple times various facets of it has come in the mains. So starting from constitutionalism will then delve deeper into the broader topic of today's time. Then we have a new system called as Dhruva that is getting planned to be installed. Now what is this Dhruva system? What is the related digipin and how it will work in connecting the unconnected areas? That this is what we would be reading when we will be exploring the Dhruva system. Then we have a topic on the declining parliamentary health. In the winter session, it is said that this is going to be the shortest winter session of India for quite some time, despite the fact that a number of important bills are being introduced in this particular system. Now, parliamentary productivity is the theme which covers this particular topic. And parliamentary productivity has time and again come in the news first, and it has also appeared in UPSC mains as a significant mark scorer. So in this we are going to explore more from an UPSC mains answer perspective, ki what are the themes we should be exploring in our answer, and how are we going to put in facts when a question throws at us some aspects related to parliamentary productivity. Then yesterday was the World Soil Health Day. Now in this context, this particular article shifts the talk from the rural soil to the urban soils. We had talked about urban planning in the context of census. We have talked about urban issues in the context of pollution. Now this is a very new perspective and dynamic which we would be opening up in today's session, that is regarding to the soil health of urban areas. And then finally, we will be looking into what are some of the changes which the government is trying to bring in the public communications framework of India, and what is the reason behind bringing in these changes. So let us start today with today's first topic, that is with respect to a growing shadow over digital constitutionalism. Now before moving into this topic, let us first know what is constitutionalism. Now, constitutionalism, to be spoken about very simply, it means the concept of a limited government. Now, when I say limited government, that means the government does not have extraordinary uncontrollable powers in a country which function under the doctrine of constitutionalism. It is rather bounded by the restrictions which the constitution imposes on it. And constitutionalism is an integral feature of Indian democracy. Now, what does constitutionalism actually does? If you want to check, then please go and see Article 21 and read the words verbatim. What does Article 21 says? No person shall be deprived of his life or personal liberty except procedure established by law. So this is the restriction which essentially the concept of constitutionalism puts. Now, in this context, in today's world, what is digital constitutionalism? To explain this, let us understand the present context first. Now, government ordered Apple and other smartphone manufacturers to provide metadata for Sanchar Sathi app enforcement from 2026, March 2026 to be specific. Now, in this context, Apple pushed back, citing some of the reasons. For example, ambiguous data collection motives, lack of consent from its users, then unlimited data storage and concerns of surveillance. Government rolled out its mandate within 48 hours, as we saw yesterday. Now, why this particular context matters in the broader view of digital constitutionalism is that this episode essentially shows the tension that exists between state power and individual digital rights. Now, state power versus individual digital rights has become a core concern from the time where technology has been cascading into, or say entering into, the domain of crime and surveillance, both. Let us understand this. Now, when I say digital constitutionalism in the simplest of terms means applying constitutional values like liberty, dignity, equality, rule of law, privacy and accountability to the digital world. That means in the digital world too, the functions of the government should be limited, and it should be limited by the values of constitution like liberty, dignity, equality, etc. Now, what is the purpose of digital constitutionalism? It essentially protects citizens from state and the corporate overreach, and further it sets limits on surveillance, data collection, algorithmic decisions and facial recognition या फिर predictive governance. Before going into these broader terms, अगर मैं बहुत साफ शब्दों में इसको समझाऊं, suppose you have an Aadhaar card. Now, for that Aadhaar card, you have submitted a number of data points to the government. Now, how these data points are going to be used, where they are going to be stored, what is the boundary of the utility of these data points, that is what digital constitutionalism essentially strives to protect. Now, why this is needed in the present times? It's because technology now mediates everything, be it jobs, you talk about welfare, KYC, healthcare schemes, your banking data. Data-driven governance has become so important that Niti Aayog has accepted it and in fact recommended measures for it time and again in its various action agenda documents. Now, in this context, a lack of digital constitutionalism places a number of risks before us. The first risk is called as the surveillance creep. Now, surveillance creep as in governments take a lot of metadata, your biometric information, geolocation, etc. But citizen monitoring in this entire data collection becomes by default. The citizen is not aware for what or for how their data is going to be used, but the government is in control of a whole range of data. Second, weak privacy protection. Now, privacy was declared as a fundamental right in the Puttaswamy judgment. But as we saw during our discussions on Data Protection Act, this has exempted the government widely and has prioritized administrative convenience over individual dignity. Third, you have efficiency is not equivalent to personal control. That means schools, insurance, healthcare use behavioral analytics. But in this use of analytics by the utility of data, citizens lose control of their own data. And finally, you have the algorithmic bias and exclusions, where suppose in a particular website which you must be using, or say welfare schemes के लिए जो websites बनते हैं, they have automated filters which have time and again shown wrongful exclusions, which essentially shows the bias which is inherent in the system. Now, these 4 points are essentially the risks that are associated if you do not have digital constitutionalism. Now, after that, don't we have any measure in our legislative framework which can deal with these risks The fact of the matter is, the major act which governs the digital world right now, the IT Act, it was made at a particular time when the artificial intelligence, biometric surveillance, algorithmic decisions and data colonization were not that big an issue, or were not still at their nascent stage as the level of technology is concerned. And the measures which are there in the IT Act, these are usually reactive and not future proof. Then you have the technology guidelines, and most of the technology guidelines come through the executive orders, not through discussions in parliament. This leads to a situation where citizens are rarely aware of what data is collected and for how long it is stored and how it is analyzed. And finally, in a number of decisions, the courts have given mixed signals. Mixed signals as in, there have been some judgments like the Puttaswamy judgment, where the court has affirmed right to privacy as an integral part of right to life. But many times technologies and regulatory solutions have bypassed the proportionality angle. Proportionality angle is something which we read in the Puttaswamy judgment. What is proportionality angle? Please go and do your homework with respect to this, because these are landmark judgments and you should be aware of those aspects. Now, here are 3 case studies where in the present times the risks of deep surveillance or the risks of not having digital constitutionalism really runs into people's lives. For example, facial recognition. In India, this particular technique is spreading rapidly, but there is no adequate safeguards, which is essentially leading to misidentification, targeting of vulnerable groups and a certain amount of discrimination. Now, in this context, it is necessary for India to have a broader institutional framework to ensure that it has digital constitutionalism. Now, what a digital constitution should contain? Now, the author has given 6 broad steps. It starts with independent digital regulator, someone who must oversee the data use, algorithmic decisions and the surveillance technology. Then it should have proportionality standards. Proportionality standards as in, surveillance should not be across the whole population, but rather it should be held only when it is necessary, specific, time bound and pre-approved by a court. Then you have algorithmic audits, where mandatory bias audits, where you are checking whether the algorithm of a particular setup has some amount of inherent bias, that should be audited at regular time intervals. Then you have transparency requirements, as in citizens should know why a decision was made, what data was used, and he or she should have the ability to challenge the automated decisions. And finally, digital literacy, that is, citizens must be aware of their rights, risks and data practices. And in this entire context, it is important to strengthen the privacy law and see that these are properly implemented. So, this is what this article is about. Digital constitutionalism has a high probability of appearing in the mains for the coming 2 years. So, please go through these points and take a note of it. Then we have the next article, which talks about a day to pause and come down to earth. Now, World Soil Day is on 5th December, which was held yesterday, and this soil day was first established by the Food and Agricultural Organization. Now, what is the purpose of this is that it highlights soil as a life sustaining resource and draws attention to the problems of soil degradation. This year's theme was healthy soils for healthy cities. Now, if you see here, the focus has shifted from rural to urban soil health. This essentially means is soil has traditionally been linked to agriculture and other facets related to agriculture. So, that is why the soils of the rural areas have always been at the forefront whenever a policy regarding a soil is brought into conversation. But this particular aspect has shifted the discourse from rural to urban areas. Now, why urban soil matters? First, they are silent ecosystem engineers. This means that they act as living filters, they act as natural sponges. This means during urban floods, if you have proper urban soils, well maintained urban soils, thick urban soils, they act as natural sponges to soak in the excess water. And then they act as carbon sinks as well, provided they are again maintained with proper amount of green spaces, urban forestry areas. Now, these areas with urban soils, they support parks, community gardens and street trees as well, which for long in India have been an integral part of socialization process. Then you have, they contain more organisms than humans on earth, such as microbes, insects, earthworms, etc., who themselves have a number of roles within the ecosystem. Then you have, they play key ecosystem services like climate regulation, as they reduce the impact of urban heat islands. The vegetation in the urban areas absorbs excess heat and carbon from the atmosphere. They behave like sponges, as we talked about, and ensure flood regulation, and they handle all the concerns regarding surface runoff and flooding. Further, they have time and again proved to be the backbone of urban agriculture, because they have supported rooftop farms, backyard gardens, pollinators, decomposers and local food chains. Adding to all this, they have been an important part of mental and physical health of the people living in urban areas, because in urban areas there are usually a lot of migrants as well, who essentially seek solace in these parks, which are again dependent on urban soil. But this year's World Soil Health Day especially explored this aspect, that there is an impending crisis which concerns the urban soils. Urban soils are under threat due to a lot of industries that are being established in the urban areas, leading to industrial contamination. Then soil compaction from construction. This is a case which you can see in Delhi right now. Then a loss of organic matter, because concrete surfaces have taken the place of natural urban soils. Now then, sealing by concrete and asphalt has further led to a suffocation of soil life and has degraded the biodiversity in the particular area. The consequences of this has been a threatened food security, compromised food ecosystems and worsening floods and heat stress. Recently, we talked about the floods which have occurred in Sri Lanka, previously Chennai floods. You must have heard about Mumbai floods. These are all the examples where not so good maintenance of urban soil have played a significant role in creating urban disasters. So, that is why it is necessary for us to have healthy soils, to build healthy soils for healthy cities. Now, the author gives a few action points to ensure this. Restore and protect urban soils, that is rehabilitate degraded land using compost, organic amendments and soil testing. Then promote green infrastructure. Green infrastructure as in use soil based solutions, not concrete, in rain gardens, for building permeable surfaces, for building tree belts. Then promote urban agriculture through construction of say community gardens, backyard food growing or container gardens on balconies, that is within your traditional neighborhood. Then adopt responsible soil management by reducing the use of chemical fertilizers, pesticides, planting native species and etc. And the most important aspect, improve and support soil literacy by creating workshops and by performing some of community events, and this can only be performed if this is done through a multi-stakeholder approach. That is, it includes the participation of states, center, local government, communities and cities. So this was the second article. Now we will move to reason thaw, that is, parliament should not be reduced to a political stage. So the news that has come up here is the winter session of parliament that began on December 1 will have 15 sittings over a period of 19 days. That is 15 sittings over 19 days, and this is one of the lowest as far as the winter session sittings is gone. Now this raises question about a number of aspects. First, what is the state of parliamentary productivity in India, and what is the impact of declining parliamentary productivity? Now if you look at the current status, first, the number of sitting days have constantly declined, with parliament that has convened for average of only 70 days annually in past decade, which is far below 120 to 140 days which was happening say in the 1950s. Then you have falling parliamentary productivity, that is, examples 17th Lok Sabha, that was from 2019 to 24, functioned at 47% efficiency. Similarly, there has been an alleged opposition marginalization. An example of this was seen in 2023 when a record 146 opposition MPs were suspended in a single session. Now, all such incidents actually point to one aspect, the doctrine of checks and balances, which is guaranteed by the constitution, a declining parliamentary productivity, how does it impact this particular doctrine? Because the legislative is hardly functioning at its full efficiency to question the executive. Now in this circumstance, the question is, what are the key factors behind the decline of parliamentary functioning? First, institutionalization of disruptions. This essentially means frequent adjournments, walkouts, slogan shouting have eroded the normal functioning time of the parliament. Now this has also led to a situation of increasing polarization, where deep political polarization has reduced consensus building. Now in such a circumstance, the only goal of the opposition becomes to oppose any policy, be it through proper debate or it could be through hapless theatrics. Then this has led to a situation of erosion of parliamentary committee system, which is an integral part of the functioning of the parliament. Now committee scrutiny has dropped drastically, as only 1/4 bills are referred today compared to what was referred to in 1990s, that was around 60 to 70%. Now what have been the impacts of this decline? Weakening of democratic checks and balances, because reduced parliamentary scrutiny has allowed the executive to dominate policy making. In such a circumstance, you do not get diversity of views within the policy making, and this accelerates democratic backsliding. Backsliding as in, there are certain critical decisions such as creation of PM CARES fund that overcome or that skipped legislative oversight. Then you have poor quality and hastily enacted legislation, and finally erosion of public trust in democratic institutions. Now this is a very important topic from your mains perspective, especially GS2, because this has appeared approximately 3 to 4 times. In this context, as much as is there in the notes, that would be sufficient to answer any of these 3 or 4 questions. If one question you would really like to attempt, and probably which UPSC can ask, is with respect to decline activity, analyze how. If you want to analyze and write a particular answer, now this is the maximum level या फिर difficulty level के respect में बात करें up to which UPSC can go and ask you. So if you want to attempt, then please attempt this question and send it. Then we have again a very important article from the respect of this year's prelims especially. Now the postal department has considered UPI like labels for addresses. Now first let us understand what UPI like label is. Now the Indian Postal Department is planning a new system which is called as the Dhruv system. Now how this will work is that it will work exactly like UPI IDs. अब सबका एक एक UPI ID है जो आपके बैंक ने allocate किया होगा आपको, जैसे so and so से name @OKSBI और से name @ICICI. Now these are your UPI IDs. Similarly, your house or the place where you stay, that will have its own identity in the form of this. Suppose your name is Ram and you are ordering from say Amazon and your house's location is at say Ramnagar @Amazon. This would be an ID which would be allocated. Now this ID, you will be the one who would be deciding कि कितने time के लिए this ID would be valid, say for the next 6 days, for the next 4 days या फिर next 5 days. So this will essentially act as a proxy for your actual address. Now how this will be implemented? This will be implemented through a draft amendment to the Post Office Act 2023, which proposes setting up of a non-profit entity जैसे UPI के लिए National Payment Corporations of India है. It will allow private companies to participate and create a common address standards across India. This is an important news. Now what will happen in this case is, just like you have your UPI, similarly you will have a geolocation tag which is called as DigiPin. Now the government has already developed a DigiPin which is essentially a 10-character code which will represent your home's latitude and longitude. Now this DigiPin will then be linked to your particular ID. So Dhruva or the Dhruva system, as we read, this particular tag will be then linked to your DigiPin. Dhruva uses DigiPin and converts it into a smart shareable address level. Now you can give companies temporary access to your address data, and this is called as consent based sharing. Now this is essentially the working of this particular system. Now why this is very crucial is, first you will have one click address sharing. That means when you go to buy purchase products or medicines or apparels, in that case you would notice that you have to fill up a number of forms, even when you are making tickets as well. But now you will have to just give one click and your address would be shared through the Dhruva system. Then it will provide precise location for rural areas, for whom it becomes very difficult right now to access any online services just because of mentioning their proper address in the address block. Then it provides privacy control through consent based sharing mechanism. And finally, it opens space for a number of private players. So that is why Dhruva system is considered as a landmark achievement, but there would be somewhere around 20 billion, I don't remember the exact number, about 228 billion digipins that have to be created. Now what is digipin? It's a 10 character code. It represents 14 meter cross 14 meter square of land. This would include longitude cross latitude ka data. So a particular location will have similar code. Now it solves problems like confusing rural address, houses without numbers, and unclear directions. Now the next part is government is trying to streamline its public communications network. Now the government of India is likely to implement a number of steps such as more intake of Indian information service officials, जो कि UPSC के through ही hire होता है, to cater to the rising number of departments and function. Then there will be a restructuring of the Indian information services cadre, that is the roles, responsibilities and functions. Then there a board of media communications is to be established, which would also oversee decisions on transfers and postings. And finally, there will be a creation of post of more than 40 embassies to strengthen communications mechanism overseas. Now, why this is important? Because this is a major overall which essentially concerns how the government handles its communication with public, media and international audiences. For now, this particular box, when you take the notes, this is the important notes which you would be needing for your prelims examination. So with that, we'll come to the end of today's news. We'll meet again on Monday and tomorrow in the offline class. Thank you.